Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this May 22nd shows that there are no major changes in the forecast versus what I presented yesterday with regards to the United States. As far as my temperature and rainfall forecast this morning, again noting that the forecast for the next 2 weeks is decidedly warmer than normal for big portions of the nation, above and much above normal temperatures being quite common. And you can see as well that additional rain is going to be falling for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day periods, but for the center of the country, not nearly as active as it has been in recent weeks, with near to below normal rainfall amounts for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. With regards to the QPF discussion this morning, no major disagreements with what this forecast is showing. I think that they are getting a little bit cute in trying to identify that small area of heavy rainfall in southwestern Minnesota and nearby areas, but otherwise I do not have any major disagreements with this forecast. Going to be chances for rainfall in the Corn Belt on every day in this period, but activity so scattered that a big portion of the area is probably going to be seeing nothing at all. Obviously, rains as you go further south in the nation, much more widespread and common, and those rains will be enhanced by the likelihood of a tropical system as we get towards late in this period. For the day 6 to 7 time frame, again, no real disagreements with what is shown here. A tropical system still bringing widespread and significant rains to the mid-south and the southeast. Some significant rains as well in the northern Rockies. Otherwise, the middle of the country not looking for anything significant in the way of rainfall for the day 6 to 7 time frame. Temperatures yesterday, still some rather chilly conditions across a sizable portion of the western and northern Corn Belt. 60s for highs, some places just in the 50s, contrasting that with warmer temperatures to the south of there, although extreme heat not seen, any 90s confined to mainly Louisiana. Rainfall totals through 1 o'clock this morning. You can find a couple of significant areas of rainfall in the Corn Belt, one across Michigan, Wisconsin, and the northern portion of Illinois. Certainly rainfall for the most part there, not wanted. Another area of significant rainfall in Ohio and in extreme southeastern Indiana. Clearly that rainfall there highly beneficial in nature. And you can see on the radar estimated rainfall, both of those significant areas of rainfall in the Corn Belt since yesterday morning. Radar this morning showing some widely scattered thundershowers starting to pop up just during the last couple of hours across portions of the western Corn Belt, while rains in the eastern Corn Belt coming to an end and moving out of far southeastern portions of the region early on this Tuesday. Looking at surface features as far as the forecast is concerned for tomorrow morning, still looking at a pocket of significant rainfall at that time in northwestern portions of the Corn Belt. Certainly not the heaviest rainfall event by far that area has seen, but again, a area of significant rainfall is likely going to be falling at around this time tomorrow morning in the far northwestern Corn Belt. Otherwise, just widely scattered rain is going to be seen across the Corn Belt at various times for the next 5 to 10 days. Looking at surface features as of 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, you can see that there is some modest model agreement that we may be seeing an area of rainfall moving southeastward through portions of the Corn Belt at that time. But again, nothing real significant or widespread in nature. You can also see at that time that we are looking at a potential tropical storm system impacting or getting closer to the Gulf Coast at that time. If it would actually be a named storm at that time, nothing worse than a weak tropical storm in nature. Models indicating that the system would likely be meandering across portions of the southeastern U.S. Into next week. If we look at 500 millibar features as of 7 o'clock in the morning on May 29th, I've noted quite often in the past that the models in general have a lot of trouble with forecasting upper level low pressure systems, particularly closed upper level low pressure systems, much more than a few days in advance. Here we have a situation where the models are indicating not just one but two closed upper level low systems for next week, and that is something that really is putting a lot of haywire into the forecast, at least with regards to forecast specifics for a lot of next week. There's the European model with its upper level low, and another one, and again, that would be associated with a tropical system that we're going to be seeing for late this week. And you can see from the various models, they all have two distinct upper level low pressure systems at that time for 7 o'clock in the morning on May 29th. But you can see that all of the models have the two systems located at very different spots and have them at a different intensities as well. And I'm not saying that any of these models are going to be correct on this on the setup. It's just a situation where the models just cannot handle upper level low pressure systems much more than a few days in advance, and that is what makes the forecast for especially the 6 to 10 day period very low confidence in nature with regards to especially rainfall forecast details. I do want to mention that as we get towards very late portions of the 6 to 10 day period for 7 o'clock in the morning on May 31st, comparing the European model in its ensemble, notice from the European model there on the left that it has a fairly distinct upper level low pressure system at that time in western portions of the Corn Belt, something that would put a good portion of the Corn Belt in a relatively favorable position for rainfall as we see the 6 to 10 day period come to an end. But if you notice from the European ensemble to the right, much less of a distinct feature as far as an upper level low pressure system is concerned for early in the morning on May 31st. So I think at the very least one has to consider this European operational solution there on the left as questionable in nature, and also makes its more optimistic rainfall forecast for the Corn Belt in the 6 to 10 day period relatively questionable in nature as well. You can see that European model rainfall forecast for the next 10 days indicating fairly widespread significant rainfall in the Corn Belt. Again, I think that forecast at the very least is questionable. GFS operational model, GFS ensemble as well, indicating fairly widespread rainfall in the Corn Belt for the next 10 days. And in general, I disregarded this morning all three of those forecasts and tended to lean more towards the Canadian ensemble and especially the European ensemble. You can see that both of those models kind of have a shadow in the central third of the Corn Belt where they are suggesting that rainfall would be fairly limited over the next 10 days. So I think that that's in general what my forecast is kind of based towards this morning, or biased towards this morning, with northwestern portions of the Corn Belt, maybe far southeastern portions of the Corn Belt being your most favorite areas for rainfall during the next 10 days, with an area in between, kind of a shadow there where rainfall amounts and especially rainfall coverage looking fairly limited for the next 10 days. Your better rainfall amounts obviously for the next 10 days going to be in southeastern portions of the nation and eastern portions of the mid-south. A daily threat of rainfall in those areas, with rainfall in those areas enhanced by the tropical system for especially for the weekend and into early portions of next week. Could be seeing some relatively decent rains in the northern plains as well over the next 10 days, although in general I think that especially the European ensemble may be a little bit optimistic on the actual rainfall that is going to be seen there. With regards to temperatures, again, after some relatively chilly weather yesterday across portions of the Corn Belt, the entire Corn Belt will be returning to above normal temperatures for today, and it is a decidedly warm weather pattern for the rest of the 2 week time frame. This is a high temperature forecast from the European model looking at Sunday morning, and you can see the extensive nature of the warmth that is going to be seen at that time. 80 to 85 degree high temperatures being seen in a broad area across the plains and into the Corn Belt, but you can see pockets in the northern plains and northwestern Corn Belt, also in the southwestern portions of the Corn Belt, that are looking at 90 plus degree highs on Sunday, a widespread 95 to 100 degree heat at that time in the central and southern plains. So again, a distinctly warm weather pattern for much of the nation for the next 2 weeks, especially in the near term for later on this week and into the early portion of next week. Much above normal temperature is going to be seen for a lot of that period for especially the northern plains and into the western Corn Belt. For the Corn Belt, for at least the next week anyway, 80 to 90 degree highs being widespread and common, but as you can see by this map right here, there will be days in which pockets in the Corn Belt, especially in the west, are able to see high temperatures above the 90 degree mark. Looking internationally this morning, briefly in Brazil, still a decidedly drier than normal weather pattern for the safrinha corn areas of Brazil for the next 2 weeks. A lot of the northern growing areas seeing basically nothing in the way of rainfall for the next 2 weeks as their dry season starts to get going there. In southern growing areas, some half to inch and a half rainfall amounts for the next 2 weeks in Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul. A little bit of that rainfall coming up for Friday, the bulk of that rainfall coming up for very late in the 6 to 10 day period and into the early 11 to 15 day time frame. A decidedly drier than normal weather pattern for wintergreen areas of the former Soviet Union for the next 2 weeks, while in Europe we are going to be looking at below normal rainfall in northeastern Europe, more above normal rainfall in southwestern Europe. Wanted to spend a moment this morning talking about the spring wheat areas of the former Soviet Union. You can see that area kind of indicated there on the right, on the left-hand map. I'm kind of circling there where bulk of the spring wheat crop in Russia is grown. And you can see that in that area that I just circled, that a big part of that area is looking at fairly significant or even heavy amounts of rainfall during the next 10 days. But also notice how exceptionally cold that same area is going to be as well. That's just looking at a snapshot of temperature anomalies for May 30th. And you can see just how cold the spring rain areas of the former Soviet Union are at that time. And that's going to be repeated on several occasions during the next 10 days at least, to the point where we could actually be seeing portions of the spring wheat area of the former Soviet Union posting some low temperatures below the freezing mark at times during the next 10 days. One of those mornings may be as early as this Thursday morning. You can see how that cold air in the central portions of Russia in their spring grain areas are contrasting the heat that is going to be seen at that same time across a good portion of Europe and the western former Soviet Union. Obviously, with such a temperature contrast, we must be looking at a very distinct weather pattern, and indeed that is the case. Notice the big ridge of high pressure across Europe and western portions of Russia as we get towards the morning of May 30th, while at the same time a very, very deep trough of low pressure in central portions of Russia, drawing down tremendous amounts of cold air from Siberia right into the spring grain areas of Russia at that time. You also may notice that we have a ridge of high pressure at that time over in northeastern China, and that is also an area that I want to spend some time focused on this morning. Probably time to take a little bit harder look at what growing conditions are like in Manchurian corn and soybean areas. You can see from the map there on the left that they have seen widespread below normal rainfall there during the last 30 days, and for the next 2 weeks anyway, the Manchurian corn and soybean areas are looking at subnormal amounts of rainfall. So again, a situation where we need to start looking at Manchurian corn and soybean areas, given the fact that they have been running subnormal on rainfall during the last 30 days, and their forecast clearly not overly wet for the next 2 weeks either. In Canada, very warm temperatures in the near term for Canada. Look at the temperature anomalies coming up for Thursday. Widespread 10 to 20 plus degree above normal high temperatures across the Canadian prairies on Thursday, indicating some high temperatures that day well into the 80-degree mark. As far as rainfall is concerned, not an overly wet pattern for at least today through Sunday. Some rain is going to be falling there for the end of this work week period, mainly confined to southeastern portions of Saskatchewan and into Manitoba, but even there, just some quarter to 3/4 inch rainfall amounts. A lot of the maps do want to indicate some better rainfall chances for the second week of the 2-week forecast for the Canadian prairies, although I do still have some doubts that rainfall even then would be exceptionally heavy in nature. Wrapping things up for this morning, in Australia, still a wetter forecast for Australia than what we have been seeing recently. A situation where the wheat areas of Western Australia still looking at very significant rainfall there, starting by around Thursday of this week, with a little bit of light rain lingering there into Friday and Saturday. Could also be some rainfall there in the 11 to 15 day time frame. Eastern winter wheat areas of Australia look to be completely dry through about Sunday. They will be seeing some modest rainfall after that for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day period, but even with that rain in the forecast, you can see that the eastern wheat areas looking to run modestly below normal on rainfall for the 2-week time frame. That's what I have for this morning. Everyone have themselves a great day.